Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Let everyone jump in and join us for our second conversation this week during Week Without Violence. Give everyone a couple of seconds to enter the room and get settled. Hope everyone was able to find the Zoom link okay. And we can go ahead and get started for time's sake. Welcome, everybody. My name is Cambria, and I'm the Advocacy Programs Manager here with YWCA Metropolitan Phoenix. Thank you for joining us for Week Without Violence. This is a global movement with YWCAs across the country and around the world to end violence against women and girls. At YWCA, we know that not all violence is acknowledged or responded to equally, and that some victims go unrecognized altogether. That's why we set aside 1 week in October to imagine a world without violence. We want to say thank you to JP Morgan Chase for empowering us this week to put these programs on and to connect with the folks across the community doing the work on the ground. In Phoenix, here we recognize that we are in the stolen land of the Hohokam and the Acamel Odom tribes. This afternoon, we are welcoming Guadalupe Gonzalez. She is the Community Engagement Manager for All In Together. In this role, she leads the Community Leadership Program and develops partnerships, programs, and tools that engage women to grow their civic leadership and support them in achieving equal voice and participation in America's civic and political life. Guadalupe has over 8 years of experience working in community development, public policy, program design, and social change strategies in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors, both in the US and in Latin America. Her areas of expertise include gender and racial justice, human rights, immigration, and civic engagement, focusing on underserved communities. So with that, Guadalupe, we're so excited to welcome you. And I would love for you to come on camera and talk about All In Together and the work that you do with domestic violence survivors and their civic engagement.
Hi, thank you, Cambria. Thank you for having us here. It's great to be partners with YWCA Arizona, and we really value the work that you're doing with all women there. So I'm going to start with the presentation. Is that okay?
Absolutely. It should be all good for you to go. I'm going to mute myself and go off video, but if you need me, I'm here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone to this really short webinar workshop where we are going to talk about get out the vote strategies for survivors of gender-based violence and domestic violence or intimate partner violence. We're going to talk about best practices to engage low turnout voters, specifically talking about Arizona's 2022 elections. The agenda for today, we're going to kind of talk about what is important to vote, especially for underrepresented communities, how to engage low turnout voters, and how to understand or develop a plan for get out the vote strategies for survivors of gender-based violence or domestic violence. We're going to talk about some challenges for these groups, opportunities. We're going to talk about some programs that Arizona currently have to support survivors, how to support as an advocate, and we're going to share some resources. A little bit about All In Together. I am Guadalupe Gonzalez, as Cambria mentioned. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for All In Together. All In Together, it's a national nonpartisan nonprofit. We equip voting age women to take action in their communities. This is heard to reduce the gap in civic engagement. This is part of our community leadership program, which is our grassroots program that it's devoted to support, engage, and educate underrepresented women so they can fully participate in democracy. Here, just the social media where you can find us for All In Together. We have Twitter, we have Facebook, Instagram, or you can send an email to info@allintogether. And for YWCA, There is the phone, the email, and the webpage. So just to start, and this is an introduction, why vote in 2021? What I want to say in this slide is that voting, it's a right, but it's also a privilege. There are a lot of groups, communities, or people living in the US who doesn't have the privilege to go and vote. And I can mention some of this in this slide, but I'm sure there are more. If you're a parent and you're concerned about your children's future, you should vote. Why? Because children can't vote, but they are affected by all the policies that are implemented, including childcare, education, health. So if you're a parent, if you're concerned about your children, they can't vote, you should go and vote for them. If you have family or friends who are not eligible to vote, you should go and vote and represent their interests. This includes people who are not US citizens. I can talk about undocumented immigrants, but I can also talk about people who are here as students, as visa holders, and even as green card holders. Green card holders have been living here for a long time, they pay taxes, but they are not allowed to vote. They are still deeply impacted by the policies and legislation. If you are a person of color or you belong to a politically underrepresented group, you should go and vote. Sadly, a lot of groups like Black, Latino, naturalized immigrants, other minorities, they constitute a very critical number of votes for the US, but they tend to be less engaged and they have a lower voter turnout for the elections. So if you are part of some of these groups, you should go and vote and make your voice heard. And if you're a woman, you should go and vote, because we did not get the right to vote in the US until the ratification of the 19th Amendment. So it took decades and a lot of fights and struggle to give us the right to vote. So if you can go and vote, you should vote. It's an important civic duty, and it's important to encourage other people to go and do it. Engaging low turnout voters. In All In Together, we prioritize reaching underserved and historically underrepresented voters who may have more challenges than regular voters. These voters face difficult challenges, and they are most of the time underserved in a general basis by the community. We can talk about women of color, low-income individuals, formerly incarcerated individuals, youth, people with disabilities, or people living in very hard to reach areas. They face more challenges in some areas, including strict voter ID requirements, because they may not have access to state ID, for instance, poll closures, reducing voting hours. So we really need to prioritize to support these type of communities who are underserved and who may face more challenges than the common challenges to go and vote. It's important to identify who they are, what are their needs, engage and motivate them, explaining the importance of voting, not only as part of democracy, but also as a way of leadership and to strengthen their communities. Important to facilitate the resources they may need, for instance, language access, tailored to their education or culture, even providing transportation, right? And we should collaborate and support also community organizations or current campaigns that are already reaching out to these groups. So I want to focus on the survivors of gender-based violence or domestic or intimate partner violence here, because this is a group that experience very unique challenges and not everyone is aware of this. Just to be clear, this is a definition by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Domestic violence is the willful intimidation, physical assault, battery, sexual assault, or other abusive behavior that it's a pattern to exercise power and control perpetrated by one intimate partner against another. That violence could be sexual, could be emotional abuse, could be threats. The numbers are very alarming. There are no reliable official statistics about domestic violence or gender-based violence, because some of people who are suffering this, they may not even realize they are in an abusive relationship. And also because others, they are afraid of reporting what's happening. But we have some important statistics here. At a national level, more than 1 in 3 women and more than 1 in 4 men in the US will experience some kind of violence related to physical violence, stalking, sexual violence by an intimate partner. Also in the United States, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner. So this added up to around 10 million of women and men. And in Arizona, the numbers are also concerning, because 42.6% of Arizona women and 33.4% of Arizona men experience or have experienced intimate partner violence or sexual violence. That's why it's important to understand the challenges and tailor our strategies for voter engagement, get out the vote, for survivors of DV or gender-based violence. They have specific challenges and we need to address them with specific strategies. Some of the challenges they may have are regarding isolation. So in general, abusers isolate survivors or victims from community, from friends, from family, from anyone who may realize what's happening in that situation of violence, or from any network of support that the partner may want to reach out to. So this is critical regarding voter engagement, because these survivors, or let's call them potential voters, they don't have the information they need regarding candidates, regarding voter registration deadlines, regarding requirements. They are isolated, and that the abuser makes it difficult for them to reach out for information or support. A lot of times there are restrictions on social media, because the abuser may have access to their cell phones, to their social media accounts, their passwords. So they may limit the access they have to voter information. They may have prohibitions, or it may be difficult for them to leave the house without supervision or without the abuser. So they may not be able to go to community events for getting out the vote, such as voter registration drives. They may not be able to go and ask for materials for their absentee ballots. It may be difficult for them to go to the polling place. And they may also be less reached out by campaigns and canvassing and surveys, because let's say someone is making a survey, knocking on the door, they may not open the door without the permission of the person who's like the abuser there, right? They may be restricted to talking to strangers in the street. So by isolating the victims, the abuser exercised political control over them, added to the physical violence or threats or anything that may be happening. So victims do not have the resources they need in order to be engaged, and they don't also have access to support that other people may have. A second challenge that survivors or potential voters may face are intimidation and threats of violence or any kind of threat regarding voter preference. So domestic abusers may threaten them regarding access to children, cutting, financial support if they don't vote in a specific way. So survivors, or in this case, victims or potential voters, may not be able to exercise freely their choice when voting, because abusers may threaten them to vote in a specific way. Also, if they decide to vote absentee or to do early voting at home, it's difficult for them to keep the privacy of who they are voting for, because abusers have completely access to whatever they are doing, and they can influence or even make them vote in a specific way. If a canvasser, if someone in a campaign is trying to reach them through a phone call in the street, going to their house, and they ask questions regarding political affiliation, activism, or these things, and the abusers hear this information and they don't agree with this, there may be retaliation to survivors or potential voters from the abuser. And the third challenge they face is privacy and concerns regarding privacy and address. There are a lot of survivors who left their home, who left the abusive relationship, and they are now living in a shelter. They have a new address, and they don't want anyone accessing their current information regarding where they live, right? So when we register to vote, we have to share our address, and some of these databases are accessible for people just to do voter registration drives and engagement. But for them, it's really important to keep this information private. So a lot of times they are concerned about having their address or private information exposed, and that abuser or stalkers can access where they are through these databases. We have some opportunities. These challenges come with some opportunities on how we can improve the policies for voter engagement and registration for survivors of gender-based violence or domestic violence. One of them is we can expand access to voting with pro-voter reforms and offer address confidentiality programs in all states. Address confidentiality programs are, I'm going to talk a little bit about them, but they keep private information such as address private, showing a different address, or mailing or forwarding mail to a nonprofit or a government building where people can go and get their mail. We also have voter kind of practices that could be early voting, automatic voter registration, and same day and election day voter registration, maybe some strategies that could help survivors or potential voters to vote. Polling places should be conveniently located along or across that jurisdiction, so survivors don't have to travel long distances to cast a ballot. And we can also think about other creative ideas, such as maybe developing a special voter ID with the special code where the name or the address of the potential voter or survivor, it's not shown, but it's made by the state, right? And it has like a unique code that allows them to vote. These are like just some ideas how we can change and tailor policies to make it more friendly for potential voters or survivors to vote. We for sure need to improve information about elections for survivors, and also give this information for elected officials. One strategy that some web pages and some organizations have, it's that this escape buttons on their web page. That means that someone could be like going through all the information for voting or voter registration, and if the abuser comes to the room or it's looking like from behind, you can quickly click on this exit or escape button, and then it would lead you to another page non-related, let's say a Google search. This is because if someone is coming and they see that you're closing on all your windows and you're turning off your laptop, that's suspicious activity, and then the abuser may threaten you, or may get a little bit violent. But if we just have this escape site that is like redirecting us to another page, it's like if we're looking for something else. We also need to make efforts to ensure that survivors have that information they need. and they understand all the policies that are there to support them to vote, and train the election officials so they can also provide this information to them and help and make it easier for them to go and cast a ballot. A third important point is to consider providing survivor-focused trainings for election officials, including how to identify signs of domestic abuse. The election officials should be able to identify someone who's going there with or without the person who's abusing, and provide all the tools or the necessary resources so they can cast the ballot without fear of retaliation, and in a safe way. I'm going to talk about some programs in Arizona that are devoted to support survivors of domestic violence or gender-based violence. I'm going to start with the Address Confidentiality Program. So this program provides survivors who have a new location that is unknown by the abuser a substitute address when interacting with local agencies. They also use this program to forward any mail that they may need. So they'll give you a different address, different from where you're living. So you can register to vote, and then you can also receive there all your mail, and then they'll forward it to you. So your real address, it's never disclosed. You are eligible for this program if you are a victim or survivor of domestic violence or sexual offense, if you're in fear of your safety, if you have moved in the past 90 days to a place that is unknown by the abuser, if you have the documentation or paperwork to support this claim, and if you are an adult or parent or guardian acting on behalf of a minor. Not all states have this program, but Arizona, it's one of the states who has this. And we are able to access this program for things such as voter registration, driver's license, school registration, and other services. And we have here that information. We have the phone contact. So this address confidentiality program, it comes along with this confidential voter listings that allow people to register to vote and participate without having any fear to disclose their current location or address. You can participate in national, state, and local elections. And it's strongly recommended not to register to vote through the regular means or the regular web page. There is a specific process through the ACP to enroll or to register to vote. Another challenge that survivors or potential voters this type may have, it's not having a permanent home. Maybe some of them are in a transitional housing, they are living on a shelter, or as we disclosed, they have not like a permanent residence where they are living. They may be living with a friend, a family member. So in Arizona, a person who doesn't have a fixed permanent address, they can and are qualified to register to vote. It can be that they are living in a homeless shelter. They could have a temporary place for living where you're a resident. You can have a county courthouse in the county where you are residing, or you can have a general delivery address for a post office that's covering the location where you are a resident. If you're qualified because you have all the other requirements and you are also kind of having either living on a shelter or, as I mentioned, a courthouse, you can still register to vote. So here we have a small graphic kind of explaining if you have your ID, you can do this, you can register. As I mentioned, if you're going to do this with the ACP, you should go with your representative or the person who's helping you in the ACP address confidentiality program to register to vote. You'll still have the option You can do, in Arizona, it says here that you can do early voting. You can also do in-person voting. So if you are a US citizen, if you're a resident of Arizona, at least 18 years old, you have not been convicted of felony, or your rights are restored, and you can write your name, you can register to vote even if you don't have a permanent residence. Another challenge, what if I don't have a government ID? A lot of survivors left their home, maybe in a rush, they left their paperwork, abusers don't wanna give them their paperwork, and they may not have a state ID. So in Arizona, they asked the following forms of ID, which contains the voter's photograph, the name and address. It could be a driver's license, Arizona ID card, a tribal enrollment card, a US federal, state, or local government issued ID. But if by any reason you don't have any of this, you can also present 2 forms of non-photo IDs that includes your name and your registered address, including utility bills, bank statements, Arizona vehicle registration, Indian census card, property tax statement, voter registration card. Here's like the list of things. You can present 2 of them, containing your address and containing your name. If you don't have any type of ID right now and you want to vote, you can still cast a provisional ballot and they'll take your ballot. You only need to, you can go through the paperwork and go to the offices to get a proper ID, and then you need to present your accepted ID at your polling place before 7 p.m. during election day. So if you're worried and you want to do like early voting, if you want to vote or you're kind of going through the paperwork phase, you can still vote, cast a provisional ballot, wait for your ID, and then go show your ID, and then your vote will be registered. How to support DV survivors. So the Domestic Violence Awareness Project has some points how we can support them. Education, educate your community. We need to focus on this very important topic and also talk about people of color or women of color, who most of the time are the ones who are suffering domestic abuse, domestic violence, or gender-based violence. We can help survivors to register to vote and develop a safety plan for voting. If you know anyone who may be in this situation, you can help them. You can also approach a shelter or an organization working with survivors. You can learn about local policies for voting, I just talk about voting without an address, voting without an ID, or help them get the paperwork they need. Promote well-informed voting in your community. We can share information, non-partisan, about deadlines, requirements, candidates, and just share it in our community. We all have like a supermarket, a laundromat, a community center, a park. Just think where people go, think where we all go, where we can have this information. And even for survivors, I'm sure they go to the supermarket, the laundromat, the park, so they can have this information in an easy way. Advocate for same-day voter registration day in Arizona. Some states, or few states, have election day registration. Arizona is not one of this, so that would be a good thing to start advocating for these policies. Here are just some resources. The Address Confidentiality Program in Arizona and how to enroll. This is not only for voter registration. This is like a huge program that offers a lot of benefits for survivors. We have the National Domestic Violence Hotline, who can provide more information. We have some hotlines from the shelter, sexual assault hotline. If you, a loved one or someone you know, it's in this situation, please ask for help, their support, and remember that you're not alone.
Guadalupe, thank you so much for coming today. This information is going to be so helpful for those on the line and those in the future who can access this video on our website whenever they need this information. Thank you everyone for coming to our first day of Week Without Violence with us here at YWCA Metropolitan Phoenix. If you head to our website, ywcaaz.org, you can sign up for the other events that we have going on this week. On Wednesday, I'm particularly excited for our Arizona Representative Jennifer Germain to come speak to us about the work that she is doing on the committee to investigate missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Arizona. We have some other community partners that are going to chat with us about the work that they're doing and the work that we can do as advocates to work towards a better future for domestic violence survivors. In the meantime, head to our website to see what else we are up to. And you can find us on all of our social media pages at ywcaaz.org.